I've got about 9 o'clock, so I think it's time that we ought to sort of settle in and get started. This session is leadership. I'm Larry Davenport, the moderator for the session. Panelist to my left is Jim Maczko from California and Jerry Reed from Florida on my right. And we're going to spend some time talking with you about leadership across the board. We're specifically going to talk a little bit about leadership in caller-run clubs, leadership in dancer-run clubs, leadership in associations, organizations, and so we've got both a dancer and a caller perspective up here. If anybody's got a cell phone or that type of thing and wouldn't mind turning it off, we'd be appreciative of that. We will also have plenty of time for open forum because I think it was said at one of our meetings yesterday that, I think you said it, Jerry, that the people here are part of our tools, the information that you're all bringing here. So right now we've got about 25 to 30 people in the room in front of us, and we've only got 3 of us up here. So that says there's 10 times the experience out there than there is up here. So we're going to try to take advantage of that as well. We were flipping coins earlier to have somebody start off, and I'm not sure what the result was. Jerry, did you win or lose?
Good morning. My name is Jerry Reed, and it's a pleasure to be with you this evening, this afternoon, this morning, whatever time of day it is. And it's really a pleasure to have so many of you with us this morning. We really do appreciate that. And I also echo Larry's words that, we'll talk a little bit up here, but we really would like to get input and feedback and a discussion from y'all as well. Just to start out, I think we've all heard that it's been said that leaders are born and not made. And I believe that's true for certain leaders. People such as Winston Churchill, FDR, and we can think of hundreds of others who were in fact born leaders, in my opinion at least. And they stepped up to the plate when it was required and did what was required for their leadership role. However, I also believe that leadership skills are skills which can be learned, and that's the purpose why the EC put this particular session on the schedule. And we hope to not only help you, but hopefully, and we're looking for input from you as well. I have a handout here that will be available after the session. I only have 20 copies, but I'm fantastic that we have so many more than that. But this will be available at the. We'll hand out what we have here, and then we'll have more available at the registration desk. This is a handout that Herb Egender put together several years ago. And for those of you who don't know, Herb Egender was one of the founding fathers of CALLERLAB and is a milestone winner and also a gold card member. And he has laid out a very interesting handout, leadership, and then, of course, a little blurb behind each of the letters. So I'll have that handed out also. It's my experience over the years, and part of my background, I spent 21 years in the Navy, and leadership in the military is similar but different from leadership in the civilian world, because in the military, leadership is absolutely critical, and orders are given. Everybody in the military wears some kind of insignia on their shoulder or their sleeve or their collar so that everybody knows where everybody stands as far as the hierarchy of the leadership ladder. And orders are given at the top and they roll down just like a lot of other stuff to the bottom. And leadership in the military, again, is different because everybody takes orders. Everybody follows orders. And that experience has helped me a lot because, quite frankly, I'm one of those people who is not a born leader. It is difficult sometimes for me to step into that role, but it is skills that we can all learn, and that's what we're about today. In the civilian world, of course, if some of the some of the methods that are employed in a military situation were applied in a civilian situation, pretty soon the only person left in the company would be the leader, and they'd say, "Where happened to all these people?" And of course, they've driven them all off. I'd like to provide just some brief information about the perceptions that I have of the various kinds of leaders. And these are strictly my perceptions, and I'm certain that there are others, and other venues would have different listings and different descriptions. But I started out with dictators, and I think that we've all experienced an organization, or probably most of us have experienced an organization where the leaders are dictators, and it's my way or the highway, and this kind of leadership can easily alienate a lot of people, especially sensitive people. And I have seen clubs where the club membership will elect a president who is, in fact, has this leadership style, and it's not long before there's grumblings, and pretty soon people start to leave, and because they just feel uncomfortable in that situation. Another category that I've put down here are leaders who are pleasers, and these types of leaders try to please everybody. So somebody says, "Well, I think we should do this." "Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go do that." And then somebody comes along and says, "Let's do this." "That sounds like a good idea too." So they try to please everybody and to satisfy everybody's wants and needs. And we all know that is impossible in any group of people, unless it's a group of one. You're not going to be able to please everybody in that group. And no matter how hard we try, and you can drive yourself nuts. Pleasers can drive themselves nuts trying to please everybody. The next category I have here are followers. And the followers, the unfortunate thing about followers, in my opinion, is that they take advice from everybody. They get all the input they can, and they will follow either the last suggestion that they got or the group that is the loudest. And that loudest group may in fact be a very small minority part of the entire group, but they're the loudest, and they can influence leaders who are in fact followers, because they don't want to, for whatever reason, they say that's they just follow whatever the loudest or the latest guidance or information that they receive. And finally, leaders. And the leaders, in my opinion, consider input from everybody. They don't necessarily follow a particular line from the loudest or the latest, but they do consider all input and then evaluate that input and then take actions based on their best estimate of what the situation is and what that information is. These leaders also provide consistent direction. And in any leadership capacity, that is absolutely critical, to be consistent. Whether you're consistently overbearing or consistently wimpy, whatever the situation is, it is important to be consistent. That way the people that you are leading know where you're coming from and know how to react to what you do. If you're inconsistent, one time you'll make a decision that you feel is correct, perhaps, hopefully, and immediately in a different, the same situation, make a different decision. So that inconsistency really drives people nuts. I know for a fact, because I've been in situations where I have a boss who in one situation would make a decision, we're going to work overtime, and then we have another situation come up that is exactly the same circumstances, and then it's an entirely different decision. So without explanation, it really can drive people nuts. Another part of this type of leader is that you stick by and support whatever decisions the leader that you make as a leader. That's part of being consistent, I believe, also. However, even though you stand by and stick by the decisions that you've made, you must be open to change if circumstances change. If not, if the decision is made and come heck or high water, that is the way it's going to be.
Was I supposed to supply the bleep there?
You were supposed to bleep.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. But and most of us have probably experienced that type of leadership as well, where a decision's made and it doesn't matter whether the circumstances change or it doesn't matter. That's my decision. That's what we're going to do. So, but an effective leader, in my opinion, takes suggestions, is open to consideration of change if, in fact, the circumstances dictate that. Now, the bottom line, square dance callers and club leaders as leaders. And I call for 3 clubs consistently in Florida. 2 of those are caller-run clubs, and 1 is a board-run club. And I'll let Jim, when he gets up, discuss, or actually Larry, most of his clubs are board-run. He's going to talk about that. But from a caller-run club leadership standpoint, the caller or cuer is, in fact, in charge of everything. That person is in charge of getting the hall, negotiating rent, advertising, the program itself, providing refreshments, collecting the money, handling any complaints that happen to come along. And unfortunately, it's been my experience, and talking with other callers too, that in a caller-run club situation, many times it's not the caller who hears those complaints, it's the caller's partners. So partners have to be aware of that as well, and different calling teams handle those situations differently. But again, in a caller-run club, the caller is responsible for everything, good decisions, bad decisions, and again, providing consistent leadership across the board in all the different situations is extremely important. There are always situations which come up, and somebody's unhappy about something that might have happened, or if they're unhappy with the way that a caller is calling, many times there's not a whole lot that the caller can do about that. But the consistency of how they handle different situations, I think, is extremely important. The bottom line of what I would like to say this morning is I believe that leadership is an important skill in what we do because we deal with people all the time. And I believe that leadership is a skill that can be learned. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Before we move the microphone over to Jim, are there any questions specific for Jerry at this point? I'll be glad to bring the microphone around. Not seeing any hands jumping in the air at the moment. We'll hold the questions till later, and I'll pass this to Jim.
From our perspective as a dancer, it seems like callers are leaders by virtue of being a caller. You're instructing the groups that you're leading, you're calling to them, and the dancers are following your calls, your instructions, and through your lessons. Dancers tend to become leaders more by default than by virtue of anything that they've gone out of their way to seek a particular position. I mean, especially with the situation in clubs these days where it is very, very difficult to find officers to take positions within clubs. And this is becoming prevalent throughout the country. I mean, where I'm from in California, it's certainly a problem, and as we've traveled, we've seen that it's true elsewhere as well. And there are organizations that are attempting to pick up and increase our numbers of dancers and of leaders through the ongoing activities that we're pursuing. But I think it's important that the dancer leader and the caller leaders cooperate with one another, support one another. There needs to be pretty much a give and take with both sides to help one another to improve our activity. Callers can motivate dancers through the fact that they are leaders and are looked up to, where when a dancer gets up to the microphone and makes announcements, it can get kind of dull and boring and people aren't paying a lot of attention. But if the caller would assist by reinforcing some of the issues that the dancer leaders are promoting, this I think would be a big help, because dancers do tend to follow callers far more readily than they do a dancer leader. And so again, the cooperation is something that we're learning is becoming more critical and more essential to the furtherance of the square dance activity as a whole. We need to continue to really start building on working together. And as if a caller can reinforce some of the items that the dancer leaders are promoting, I think that this would really help the activity, because I think dancers do tend to follow the caller leaders a little bit more readily than they do those of us who are less experienced in the leadership field. Again, many of the dancer leaders are there by default, not because they really want to be, and so they're just trying to get on and off the stage as quickly as they can. And the dancers are realistically there to dance. They're not there to listen to the dancer leaders go on and on about a special event or an activity that we're attempting to promote. But again, if a dancer wants to find out where the next dance is, or they need to pay attention, and the callers can reinforce these announcements. From operating aspects of groups, being a nonprofit entity kind of lends itself more toward a dancer-run or an officer-run organization than a individual-run. Again, the proceeds from a caller-run organization wind up in the caller's pocket, where that would not be considered nonprofit, but where it's a nonprofit group that's organized for the promotion and perpetuation of square dancing, or for a club. That gives the club the opportunity to obtain facilities at less or maybe even no cost, and that may not be available to a caller-run group or organization. So there are benefits to having a dancer-run organization. Granted, you can have differences amongst dancer groups that tend to distract the caller, or maybe even cause the caller to be replaced when maybe that's not in the best interest of the group. But these things do happen, and there's basically pluses and minuses to both sides of our organizational structure at the club level, whether they be officer-run or caller-run groups, where having control is maybe a benefit for one person to operate it, so that people have consistency. Changing officers can result in inconsistencies and actually destroy a group where people don't believe that the leadership is taking the group in the right direction. Where when dancers go to a caller-run organization, they pretty much know where the group's going and what's going to happen from week to week. Where when officers change, there can be easily a different direction taken in the group, and that may not please the majority. So again, it's good that when people can cooperate, and the leaders themselves need to cooperate and show a positive unified front, with the callers and dancer leaders working hand in hand to bring things together and move the activity forward. Organizationally, in addition to the club level, of course, the clubs gather together in associations locally, and this helps to promote the dance functions. And for the most part, these are dancer organized groups rather than individual run organizations. And this pretty much is the case on up the ladder through the state organizations and the national dancer organizations. And the nonprofit status there has its benefits for these groups. And so I think that's kind of the differences between the caller run and the dancer run groups is nonprofit status versus for-profit status. And this, I think, is an aspect that is something that is a reality that we need to attempt to recognize and see that there are places for both, but to understand that there are limitations for both. Again, cooperation is really the key. The power of the microphone is something that the caller has mastered through his learning experience to become a caller, and this is also a benefit. He's able to motivate his dancers readily, and those of us who are less experienced at talking on the microphone don't seem to have quite the same effect or impact on the dancers that we're attempting to lead and encourage to support other functions. And realistically, there are things that motivate callers and things that motivate dancers, but they should be united in motivating for the success of the group, for the club. If they can work together to motivate the dancers to do what is in the best interest of that particular group, then everyone wins. And we always enjoy a win-win situation, whether it be dancing successfully and completing a tip with everyone, the smile on their face at the end, or at the end of the dance, everyone walks out and are greeted by their dancer leaders as they leave, and as well as when they come in. The dancers go home happy, and this is always a win-win situation and something that we need to work on together. And again, the callers are an integral part of the leadership of the activity as well as the dancer leaders. But turnover in the dancer leadership tends to lead towards some inconsistencies and things that we need to work on together for the longevity of the activity. It's a wonderful activity that we all enjoy, or we wouldn't be here. We're all dedicated to it. And from a dancer perspective, we look upon CALLERLAB as a true leadership organization, and have generated extremely successful leaders over the years. And it's a pleasure as a dancer to have the opportunity to work with callers and CALLERLAB and the activities that you're pursuing. We enjoy coming to your conventions and being invited to attend, and it's a special experience that we encourage other dancers to tend to participate in whenever they have the opportunity, because it's something we go home very rejuvenated, and meeting new people is always a wonderful aspect of it. But again, leadership is something that we can all improve upon, and I agree wholeheartedly with Jerry that it is something that can be learned, but we dancers tend to be a little slower at learning some of the things that you folks have already mastered, the microphone and motivating dancers for the success of the activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any questions for Jim before we move on? And we get the microphone and push the little button on top up. Yeah. And if you would mind telling us who you are and where you're from.
I'm Erin Byers. I'm from Sacramento, California. I'm going to take this opportunity to say something that's really on my heart and has been for a long time. I don't think callers realize just how much dancers look to them for leadership. There are many, many callers out here who feel that the minute their foot goes off the stage, that their leadership role ends. And that is not true. Those dancers look to you for leadership all the time. Everything you do, they watch and they perceive how square dancing should be from you. And just as a little test, if you want to see how much that matters, go to a new dancer dance sometime where there are new dancers from several different clubs with different callers, and watch those new dancers on the floor. You can pick out who their instructor is by the way they dance. If you've got an instructor like my husband who's more outgoing and fun and lets the dancers, he likes to have the dancers talk back to him, they're going to dance that way. If you have another caller that's more subdued, more straightforward, and just, basically calls, his dancers are going to dance that way. They look to us every minute. So things that we do and say off the stage matter just as much as the things we say on it.
Thank you. Bring that back forward. Okay, back to Jerry. These type have 2 buttons on them. You know, they get, if you get past one button, it becomes confusing.
Just as a follow-up to that, too, that what Aaron was saying, many times, like after the dance, this leadership applies as we go to the restaurant or wherever we might meet after a dance. And I agree absolutely with what Aaron is saying, is that the dancers do look to the leader, to the callers, for leadership for the reasons that Jim mentioned, certainly because we're on the microphone more, but also another thought that Jim said cued something in my mind too, that the club folks, the leadership in the club, a new president's come in, a new board, those kind of things, but it's been my experience that over the years the caller is really the consistent leadership in any club situation. The callers normally last, well, in my situation, a couple of weeks, you're out of here. But over the years, you know, that's the consistency there.
All right. A few thoughts I'd like to add based on what I've been listening to and my own experience. I've been listening to Jerry and Jim. First of all, my background, I call 3 clubs in the San Francisco area, and they are all dancer-run clubs. By day, I'm come out of a corporate background as opposed to a military background. I carry the title of director by day, so that means I'm supposed to be a leadership type person both day and night. Sometimes it's hard to tell how that works out. But one of the things I think you have to remember, whether it's a caller-run club or a dancer-run club, that is still about partnership. It's partnership of everybody that's in that hall. There's nothing. Sure, the caller has the microphone, and the caller has people looking up to them, and the caller has a leadership mantle handed to them. It's really important what the caller does with that leadership mantle. The dancers are there not because anybody told them they had to be there. They're not punching a clock. They're not getting paid for being there. It is our recreation. And so leadership, to me, in the calling environment is more one of influence rather than one of directing. Directing means somebody reports to you and you can tell them what to do, and they may not care for it too much, but they're going to do it anyway. If you try that style in a dancer-caller partnership situation, I think it's going to take you into a difficult area. The other thing about leadership is I think about leadership from my corporate life as well as my calling life a lot. And the type of work I do is more one of influence in the daytime as opposed to directing people as to what they're supposed to do. So it's a topic I think of a lot. Leaders should be able to provide some vision to where a group is going. Should be able to provide a continuity. I heard consistency. It shouldn't be we're going to go left today, right tomorrow, and who knows where we're going to go the following day. So it's a very important thing. Leadership can be also falling into the area of decision making. Leaders make decisions. But I think I heard Jerry talk about the leader that makes a decision in a vacuum and doesn't take into account the people in that partnership is not going to make a good decision. So in our dancer-caller partnership, there's more one of consensus decision-making, I think, than there really is one of one single decision maker. You've got to be very careful about that. So how does that translate back into what I try to do as a caller in a board-run club, if you will? Oftentimes the caller is the most consistent leadership that you have in that arena. A caller who has been doing a club, I've been calling, let's see, the 3 clubs I've got, I've been calling on the average of these groups for 10 to 15 years each. And so if you think about it, dancers will come into the hall and dancers will leave the hall. You won't have leaders from the dancer side won't have that same continuity across that board. And so to me, a caller in that situation can very much be a voice of consistency, not necessarily the voice that's setting the course of where that club goes, but it's helping the people who are leading the club from a dancer perspective as to where that club goes. Something that Jim mentioned, just things like microphone technique. If you get a new president who's nervous on the microphone, one of the best things a caller can do is help them understand understand how to become proficient on the microphone, not stand over on the side and just let them sort of sink. So there's so many little ways that a caller can provide the advice, the input, the information that might be missing from the new leadership in the dance, from the dancers organization side, so that you can provide some of that continuity. I heard also as we were sitting up here, as we were all listening, partners play a critical role, or can play a critical role. If you are a caller whose partner is consistently at the dances, I don't remember, Jerry, did you say or did Jim say, but generally who's going to hear the complaints is the partner, not the caller. So the caller and partner who understand how to be a leader couple and not just a leader caller is a very important aspect of that. And so my wife, Kathy, she's on the floor. She's letting me know whether people are happy, whether I've missed something or not in my leading as the caller position. And if I don't listen, then I'm not doing the best job I can do for the dancers, because she's getting the things that I need to know. Do you know you have good leadership in a club? You do when you know that it's not hard to find new leaders. It's not hard to find new people to come into the club, and you've got a club that's growing. I think a lot of us would say, well, our clubs aren't really growing right now. They're sort of about the level they've been, or maybe they're dropping off a little bit. That's where that partnership between the caller and the dancers to determine what is charting the course of the future for that club. How are we going to recruit? How are we going to work together? How are we going to make a success of it? It's leadership that's going, and that vision of the future and how we can work as clubs is going to make a difference into the success of the club. I think at that point, those are just some thoughts I wanted to add, but I just really want to reemphasize it's a partnership. It's influence. It's using your leadership gently at times. It's using your leadership to smooth over situations that you can see that could go out of control, but as a person that can provide some influence, that you may be able to help those situations become productive rather than destructive. I'd like to leave it at those thoughts, because we've got about 30 minutes here, and I'd like to get some discussion going and get some hands in the air. Jerry, do you have something else to add? Or Jim?
One leadership technique that I kind of encourage people to utilize is to listen. Being a good listener is very, very important. I mean, you have to. Sometimes it's tedious listening to some of the ideas that people share with you, but it's important to hear them out and not necessarily make a comment one way or the other when you've done hearing what they have to say, but take their ideas along with the ideas of others, mix them together, add your own ideas, and come up with an even better plan. But it's your plan, and it's something that you can lead others into following. Again, listening is part of square dancing. We have to listen to the caller, but we need to listen to our co-dancers as well, our fellow dancers, and to attempt to use their ideas to improve the activity. So listening is also a very, very important leadership tool.
Can we get some hands in the air? There's got to be some questions or some experiences or what you see from a leadership point that's gone well. Experience? Some hands. How did you get appointed the person has to run around with the microphone?
I have no idea.
Remember, on the microphone for the tape, people who listen to the tapes do not like silence. And name, for Jerry's purposes, rank and serial number. For anybody else, just hometown and state or country.
My name's Dane Williams, retired military. Rank full colonel.
Do you remember your serial number?
I have three of them. 02-283-773, US 55175-294, and my Social Security number. Oh. I can recite that, too. I spent over 38 years in the military and retired military. And so I can relate to some of the things that you're saying. I didn't know what leadership was. I was raised out in the country, and I was a hick in the broadest sense of the term. So my first association with being a leader was when I got drafted in 1952. And why it happened, I don't know, but the lady at the draft board handed me all the draftees' records and their train tickets and where I was to report to, and I was all of a sudden a leader. And I don't know why she did it, but that curse has followed me all my life. It can be a blessing at times too. But in the military, it's different than civilian life. what you say. What I kind of related to in the military was mission-oriented. Your unit or your particular group was given a mission, and you followed that assignment, and you did it probably because you believed in that mission. Same is true in a square dance club. As a leader in a square dance club, whether you're a caller or a member of the club, you got to decide what that mission is and where you want to take that club. And too many people don't grasp that mission of the club. What do we want to do with that club? Some people think the idea of a club, you start it and you push them up to the highest level that you can possibly achieve, A1, A2 challenge, may not be the best thing for the club in the area that you're in. So you've got to analyze the mission before you move them. One thing that I've become really aware of is one of the missions as a caller and a leader is to make square dancing fun, F-U-N, fun. That's the key word in the whole thing. And you got to get your dancers enjoying it. You got to get your dancers having fun. And if you've done that, you've got a broad leeway to work from there. Just where you want to move your club. Our club is one of the in Salida is one of the stronger clubs in the southeast area. We have a large membership. We're holding our membership. We're running in the black. In fact, even with a surplus, and we even pay callers bonuses. So we're doing something right. And but the key element I've found is you've got to have a club that has fun. And how do you tell when your dancers are having fun? Pick up a microphone, and I've learned to read faces. Look out there and watch their faces. If you got a bunch of sour faces out there, no smiles, you're doing something wrong. You look out there and read faces, and everybody's having fun, moving to the music, and you're doing something right. And you got to keep that club moving at a fun pace. And that's what I really do and what I perceive as my mission as a caller.
That really comes back to people are not required to be at a square dance. They're only going to come there if it's their recreation, if it's their best night out of the week, if they're smiling. I like to see when the tip is over, if people gather together and there's just a big buzz of conversation going on. Everybody's just glad to be with everybody before the next tip starts, and then they're also smiling when the next dance is going on. It's very important. Next. Who's next? I saw some other hands.
Dora Olson from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I just wonder, as dance leaders, do you get together just with your board? Do you get together with the whole dance club to determine what you would like to do, what direction your club is going to go? So, and I know you would include the caller in this, but how would you run that successfully as a dancer leader? You're the president of the club.
I don't know that you do always want to include the caller in all your meetings.
All right, good.
I think that there are situations where you need to have a meeting of just the board, and then the board will make a recommendation that perhaps the club will take action on, rather than, or you could have a brief meeting during a dance where you have the entire club participate.
Okay, so you'd say after you'd have a brief meeting after the dance, or, I know you don't want to have a lot of meetings, but I just wondered how the dance leaders would handle this.
Right. I think it depends on the situation. I mean, if you're dealing with a situation with the caller that you're having to make a decision on, and of course you don't want the caller in attendance, and but hopefully that's not the problem.
Well, so what are you going to say what are we going to do this year? So what do we want for our dance club this year? New ideas, things that would make it more interesting, things that the club wanted to do together.
Right. There, I think I'd try to include as many people as possible. If you can schedule a meeting, not necessarily during a club night, or even have a picnic and have a meeting as part of that, where you get everybody's participation, everybody's input, maybe outside the actual club confines. But you do want as many ideas as possible, and try to utilize, especially new ideas that can bring more fun into the club.
And the clubs that I work with use both a board meeting and a full membership meeting approach, and nobody likes any more meetings than you have to. But it's for brainstorming, if you will, the more people, the better, just to get ideas on the table. For decision making, oftentimes it's a smaller group that is more effective at making the decisions than the larger group. And so playing those both off against each other, a board might get together to brainstorm some ideas that they want to use as discussion starters so that they have a general meeting, whether it be at a picnic or at the club. I mean, you can figure those out to see which ideas seem to be resonating with the club in general. And then the decisions at that point, depending, may work in the bigger general meeting or may want to go back for more discussion in the board meeting. You just have to decide that. With regard to including the caller or not, I think you include the caller by topic for helping to build the vision or the mission or the future of the club, or to think about where it's going, or how are the dance programs working, or what is the caller's input into the new class, what its pace should be, how it should be organized. You want to bring the caller in. I personally don't feel any particular need to be in board meetings myself or any other meetings. I've got plenty of meetings by day, but I want to be able to talk with folks and provide the input they need. So I think there are a variety of ways you can approach that and get that on the table. But I think that smaller groups are better able to arrive at decisions. Larger groups are better able to put all the ideas on the table. At the end of the day, you do want, whether it's a single decision maker or a consensus, you want people to be able to buy in and be happy about where the club's going.
Thank you. Thank you.
One quick addition on that also about including the caller in board meetings or even club meetings. As callers, we know that we are very influential, and just as Jim said, we have the mic. And we know that we're very influential to the club members. So as callers, I would caution you that if you do attend a board meeting or club meetings, to realize that what you say is going to carry much more impact, probably, than the other people in the group. So just be aware of that and know that what you say is going to have a pretty high impact.
Callers that can always remember that it's a partnership might be able to better remember how to appropriately get their input. Next.
Susan Morris from Redmond, Washington, and this leads right into what my question was originally. In our area, the clubs are dancer-run, but they have guest callers. So I teach lessons for a couple of different clubs, but I am not the club caller. So it's a totally different situation in providing leadership, because one club is far enough away that I'm there every week for 20 weeks for lessons and maybe a couple dances during the year, but I'm not there all the time to provide leadership like what they're going to do for the next recruiting season. And so my question is that I've been puzzling over for all lessons this year is, how do I provide some leadership, like ideas from here onto the club when I'm not invited to the meetings, not the club caller?
So even though it's only a dance or two or whatever a year, do you see the same clubs consistently over over the years? Even yeah, because I'm remembering back to before I headed for California. I was in the Northeast in Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, and a lot of clubs there did not have a club caller, but did in fact bring in different guests every year. But I know I had a schedule that I would see those clubs over a period of 5 years. I might call for them once or twice, but I might see them over several years. Is that your situation?
No, they tend to have, they're trying to have different callers every month, and there might be 3 or 4 that come every year, but the others are all different.
Okay. Before I hand it over to Jerry, I think you can still realize that any time you're there, you have the opportunity to talk with folks, to talk with their leaders, and to understand what some of their thinking is. And again, as a caller coming in there, you still have the opportunity to provide them advice, even if it's not the same situation as if you see them every week or every year. Jerry.
I understood you to say that you teach the class for them?
I teach the class.
Right.
And so that's my consistent contact with them as 20 weeks during class.
Yeah, but believe me, and you know this, and any of us who have taught classes know that the bond between the instructor and the class is extremely strong, and you'll have tremendous impact, especially on those people that you have taught. And I agree also with Larry. Even if you're not invited to the board meetings, just one-on-one individual talks with the president or the board people can influence how, at least get your input to them, even if it's not in a formal meeting.
Because what Jerry picked up on there, your contact with that club as their class caller gives you a lot of knowledge of what that club's doing, and a lot of input and contact with their leaders. And you don't have to be in their meetings to be influential. Next.
Tom Rudebach from Ohio. I want to just reemphasize something that Larry mentioned about involving the club in the planning. Some of the clubs I've called for and worked with, I have encouraged them at a non-dance activity, be it a picnic or covered dish dinner or whatever, to get their officers or one of their leaders to get a flip chart and just start around the room with no negatives. We did that before. It won't work. List everything that you can possibly think of. And one example I used with one of the clubs, I said, how about a Hawaiian cruise? We're from Ohio. We know we can't take an Hawaiian cruise, but let's rotate it around to a theme night. And I have encouraged them to do that. Take all those suggestions, give it back to the officers or the board and and let them prioritize them. Maybe you can pull several of the things together. And I've seen it work successfully. Another comment is I'm very much the situation where this lady is. I teach for 3 clubs, and I only get 2 or 3 dances a year, or depending on how often they dance. But I am constantly sending the officers ideas. If I see a clipping in a magazine or through a part-time job, I get a lot of leadership thing through the internet. If I see something that might apply to square dancing, even though it has to do with sales, I'll copy it and send it to the officers. I tell them strictly an FYI, do what you want to, but I'm always, and I feel that is an encouragement for them to look at just different ideas.
Can I just follow up on what you said? You're absolutely right on the generating ideas or brainstorming. There's a different, brainstorming is putting ideas on the table without being judgmental, without getting into a discussion of each one as you go, and without tearing it apart. Keeping it positive, just getting the ideas up there. You can come back later and then start to discuss the merits of each idea. But brainstorming in itself should just be get the ideas up there. Don't discuss them, just get them up there. And it's going to be a lot more productive in terms of generating ideas if you do that. Next. Must have another hand in the air. Yes, we got
Justin,
one.
Nice to see you could get out of bed this morning.
Thank you. This question is actually for Jerry.
Did I hear a name in
I'm Justin from Memphis, Tennessee. Justin Russell. This question's for Jerry. You were talking earlier about having your 3 clubs, and 2 of them were caller run, and then the other one was board run. Over the past, which one has been working more successful, or which one do you find that's better?
Actually, all 3 of them are successful. For different reasons. We are very fortunate in the club run, the board run club, to have a strong president who has all of the positive, most of the positive leadership qualities. She's consistent. It takes input from everybody and provides good leadership to the club. She's not a dictator, so she takes good input. So that is successful in that regard. I do not attend their board meetings. The club meetings that they have tend to be very short, 4 or 5 minute, 10-minute meetings at a dance. We do have an annual picnic that the club organizes. With the caller run, Dell is there at most of the dances, so she gets that input from the dancers, and we discuss it. And I got to admit, I don't take all the advice that I get, but I'm trying to work on that. But it's been my experience that both the club run, board run, and the collar run clubs that I've worked with and for are pretty consistent across the board.
Got a hand over there?
I'm going to stand up so you can hear me better. Lyle Beck, Dubuque, Iowa, past president of USDA. We're not callers, we're just dancers. Jerry just mentioned something.
Can I correct you, man? Take the word "just" off of that. You're not callers, you're dancers. There's no "just" about it.
Okay, I accept that. Jerry brought up a point, attitude. Positive attitude is so important, whether you're a caller or a leader, club leader, that positive attitude is infectious, and I think that is one of the most important factors in being a leader. And Tom mentioned, too, using the flip charts. When we were president of USDA, we had a situation come up that, it didn't look very promising, but at one of our meetings, I got a flip chart. And what are our possible solutions to this problem? This one happened to be a financial one. Throw out all the ideas you can, and then don't talk anything down. Just get ideas up there. Then the officers can meet together and go over these, which have merit, which do not. And I think that's a very good exercise.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Priscilla Davis from Spokane, Washington, Colbert. But we've been in both situations, too, as my husband is the caller. And the last 11 years we lived in Reno Sparks, Nevada, and he called for 4 clubs there. One of them was Caller Run, the other 3, the Club Run. And I would say, from my point of view, the Caller Run Club was our most fun club. And not because, I guess, of anything, but the dancers came to dance. There were no politics involved. Basically, we ran the club, but every time we danced, and it was an advanced club, so they were there to dance. But all you had to do was say, would you like to help do this? I mean, we had 2 or 3 that showed up to help us set up chairs, get things ready for us. Some brought refreshments, never asked. They just did it. And we always made announcements. We always let them aware of what all was going on, etc. And they just pitch in. And in the other clubs, I think we probably needed to realize that all you have to do is ask. Sometimes there are people out there that will do things, but they need to be asked. They're not the ones to step up all the time. But you ask somebody, and you're going to find a really good person to help you out. I ended up, being the president of one of those clubs because at that point it was a small club and there wasn't anybody who really wanted to step up to the plate, but they wanted to keep dancing. So I said, okay, I'll help. Maybe I'm not one of those born leaders, but my job put me in that position too. And they kept the club going. And when we got ready to leave, everybody said, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Here you are, the caller of all these clubs. But there's people who stepped up to the plate. Those clubs are doing fine. The Caller Run Club, of course, was abolished because we were gone. But I think you just have to ask people to do things too, and you're going to find that they're going to do it. In the club run, or the dancer run clubs, they very much depended on our input. I mean, very much. Doug's a leader, in regards to knowing square dancing, and that's when I was the president, of course, I was part of the board. We sometimes told Doug to stay away, of course, but it's all working together. It's the communication, everything that you're talking about here, and it'll work, if people want it to do. And the fun things and the social things, that's what we all tried to do too. So,
Yeah, that's what Priscilla said is exactly right. And I'm sure as callers and dance leaders, we've seen clubs that suffer from that politics problems. And I agree with Priscilla in that with a caller run club, and answer also to what Justin had asked, that the politics within a caller run club, and it's been my experience at least, have been much less than in a board run club because everything falls to the caller. But consistency and communications are critical in this whole process.
Just before we go to the next hand over here, politics hadn't come up yet in this thing, but if you are a caller working with a club-run club, I think it's important for the caller to stay outside of the politics, to stay objective to the politics, to side with, if there are two parties, two different thoughts that are the contention, if you will, of the politics. I think the caller still has the opportunity to stay plugged in to all members of the club and to provide some objective input and advice and influence there. I think it's probably very important for a caller to not play sides in those situations, but to really be a resource for the club.
Okay. Marie Gladson from Cedar Park, Texas. My question is, how much in the way of leadership do you feel a club caller who is a club caller which calls every week at these clubs, not just a guest caller, should be involved in the leadership? Is there a line that we shouldn't cross or that we should not be involved in? Because we started our clubs, we tend to be in the leadership a lot, and we've had some problems with some of our caller run. Well, we started these clubs and then we gave it over to the dancers. Okay, we decided that it might be in our best interest to have the club run the club, but since they're small and since they started from ground zero, we felt they needed a lot more leadership. And so at this point, we are having some problems with our leadership because they don't want us as involved.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a tough question. The clubs that I call for have been in existence a long time, so I wasn't in the same situation of helping to start those clubs and moving them over. I think you have to think about what you want your continuing caller couple role to be in that club and discuss that with the leadership. I see my position in supporting the leadership to be the best leadership it can of the club, and to take, if I take a primary leadership role, it has more to do with the dance programs themselves and how they're administered, not in a vacuum, because again, it's a partnership to see what's going to be the best experience for that club, but how I teach is pretty much mine. But other aspects of it, I don't think it's from a caller point of view. For me, it's not leading the club where to go, but providing input for them to help find their own way. I'm not sure that tells you what the line is, because I'm not sure where the line is either. But it's you really have to decide what that leadership partnership is, and I think you need to have some discussions with your club leadership on that. Aaron, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, it's almost like your kids growing up. You know, you start when they're really little and you have to tell them every single thing to do. And then when you say, okay, you're an adult now, you can go out on your own. And then they decide how much impact you have on them. But sometimes they move back home. So it could be that 2 or 3 years from now, you'll have a whole new board in there, and they're going to want to have you more involved in what's happening. Every time, we have this cycle of new leadership in a club aspect, they're going to change not just the focus on where the club is going maybe, but how much they want you to be involved. Because we have clubs that want us to be involved in everything, and then we have clubs that just want us to show up and call. And each of those clubs have to make that decision on their own. But it changes in time.
You're right. Every new leadership change I've seen over the years with the clubs I call for have wanted a different amount of caller input. And I just sort of go with the flow. Yeah, it can change. We're coming up on the hour. I think we can take one more, and I see Lawrence's hand in the air, or maybe we take 2 or 3 more if you don't want to run right away. Okay, we'll come back. We got 1, 2, 3, and that'll be it.
Mel Menschel from Sidney, Nebraska, and there's a couple of things I'd like to discuss. One of them is an open heart, and another thing is common sense, and another thing is attitude. If a person has those 3 virtues, you shouldn't have any problems. But I also like to add follow-up on every item that comes along. So it might be well to take a good look at what's going on around your club. And if something comes up and there's no additions that are taken care of or anything like that, they should follow up on it and go out and find out what the problem is. If you find out what the problem is, you can solve your own problems. So it's a good idea. I have a caller run club, and I have also a club that I call for about, I think about 40 years. And we're still doing pretty good, but we're down to what we were when we started. We need to work together, like everybody has agreed, as callers and dancers. Dancers come to me for advice, and I go to them for advice. And I think this is this plateau that we should be on.
Very good thoughts. Lawrence over here near the wall.
Lawrence Johnstone, Ukiah, California. Now, in spite of the fact that I'm probably twice Justin's age, I am probably one of the youngest, if not the youngest, period caller in our area, Larry. And I call for 4 different clubs. I'm generally much younger than the dancer population, and I find a couple of the clubs, they tend to discount my input. I don't feel like I have much of a leadership position in those clubs. Is there something I can do to counter that?
My quick answer is patience and relationship building. The more they get to know you, the more I think they'll listen to you. And I don't know if anybody else has any sage advice, but I really think it's step 1 to getting to a point where your leadership is accepted is really building those relationships with those folks to where the dialogue is in place first, and then I think the leadership can follow that. Who had a microphone? Yeah, but we're not going to miss our last speaker here.
I'm Mike Hogan from Omaha, and I can speak to that because for the tape, I'm 44. I get 2 years on you. Now I maybe have an advantage. I've been calling 31 years, so I've got years and years with these people. Most of these people that are my parents' age, a lot of them I've taught, so I've got that advantage. I've been kind of thinking about a lot of these things that are going on, and I wanted to touch on my feeling on as far as when we're talking about leadership is there's a difference between being an administrator and being a leader. We have a lot of people in our clubs that get elected president that they were the last one that we could talk into raising their hand volunteering, and that person while we love them to death, they're really not a leader in that. What they're going to do is they're going to book the hall for the next year, and they're going to book the callers for the next year, and they're going to make sure we have our Christmas party and our picnic. To me, a leader truly leads, and by that, a leader has vision. Larry, you talked about vision. Now, I'm not saying that we can't be dictators. All we can do is use that influence that we have to make positive change in our activity, which means when you guys go home from this convention, you will hopefully have learned a lot. You have a responsibility to share that knowledge that you have with the dancer organizations and the caller organizations back where you come from. And what I found in terms of what you were talking about is the more that you do that, the more that your dancers and your callers and the people in your communities will understand that you're not just a person that has ideas, but a lot of the ideas that you have a true foundation. You've learned from your experiences and from other people's experiences. And then as long as you do have compassion, an open heart, some of these other things that you're talking about, you can come to the table with ideas that you've seen work in other parts of the country or things that you've seen in your business life, and you can put those kinds of ideas out on the table. And if you've got some proven experience with that, these people will follow you. And they will. Obviously, you have to take their ideas into consideration, but you can actually get people doing positive things to help their clubs, help their square dancing in their areas. So
right.
It's more than just administering. Make sure that you truly do take vision and lead. Vision and lead. Great sum up. We got one last. We were into the break period. I had one last hand in the air that I said to acknowledge, and then I think we can stay around and talk afterwards, but I think we'll go off mic at that point.
Again, Dave Williams from Salida, Colorado. I use a lot of humor, and I want this to be taken that way. I have a next-door neighbor that is a city administrator, and she has a bumper sticker on her car which says, if the people lead, the leaders will eventually follow.
On that note, I want to thank everybody for attending. It's been a large crowd, and you stayed awake the whole time. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jerry.